Hello, listeners. This is the Empathy Here, Not There podcast, where we explore the role of empathy in all aspects of our life. I'm your host, Curtis Campogni, and we are diving into a topic that is essential as it relates to empathy, and that is the roadblocks that prevent us from practicing empathy effectively. I appreciate you for joining me for episode 5. Let's talk about it. Empathy is often discussed as a vital tool for connection. But what happens when we want to be empathetic, but then we find ourselves struggling to do so? There are common barriers to empathy that stop us from practicing understanding, taking an active interest in someone's perspective, even if we're trying our best. So let's draw on some real life examples, talk about these concepts, and even touch on a little ethos, logos, pathos to make sure that we're considering empathy from every single angle. So first things first, understanding empathy through the lens of ethos or our credibility, trustworthiness is incredibly important. Empathy is closely tied to the trust that we place in others and the trust others place in us. When we experience things like emotional burnout, for example, our ability to empathize can diminish, leading to a breakdown in trust. Colleagues, friends, our clients, they might sense our emotional exhaustion and begin to feel that we're not present or fully engaged, or that we have the energy to be on this empathetic journey with them. This erosion of trust can then make it difficult to build or maintain the connections that empathy relies on. If you don't have trust, you have nothing. And trust is a really interesting concept because it can take forever to build, and one interaction, one moment can bring it all crashing down. Now consider like the logic of empathy or the logic behind our actions. Personal biases often act as a logical barrier to practicing empathy. We might believe that we're making rational decisions, but in reality, these biases can cloud our judgment. One good example of this is the halo effect. And this is where we overemphasize like one positive characteristic of a person and make broad assumptions about their overall character based off of that single trait. It's a mental shortcut or heuristic that can prevent us from seeing a person's full complexity or really understanding their needs, right? So you interact with someone and they're from the same neighborhood as you. Does that cause you to automatically view the other things they're saying as positive? Maybe someone is not the same political affiliation of you or religion. Does this then cause you to view or hear the things they're saying in more of a skewed light? Those mental heuristics can definitely be a barrier to empathy. In the world of sports, and you know I always like talking about sports, our last episode, episode 4, we dove into empathy in combat sports. The role biases and empathy also play a significant role. And a good example of that is Jackie Robinson, who was the first African American to play in Major League Baseball. He was faced with tremendous bias from players and fans alike. Many believed because of those biases that African Americans didn't belong in the sport. But Robinson's perseverance, dedication, shattering those stereotypes and those biases did lead to an eventual shift in attitudes among his peers and the public, showcasing how challenging these biases with empathy and understanding can lead to positive change. Speaking of sports, another good example is Billie Jean, a pioneer for gender equality. When she defeated Bobby Riggs in the Battle of the Sexes tennis match, not only did she say, hey, I'm an athlete too now, but she shattered those preconceived notions about women's capabilities in sports. Her actions demonstrated how you can challenge biases with empathy, understanding, and action, and can lead to significant social change, allowing us to push forward the conversation about gender equality. So drawing on those real life examples to help plant seeds and shift attitudes that could potentially get rid of some of those biases are really important to overcoming those barriers. And those are really two good examples of that happening. Let's, though, take a moment to go back to emotional burnout for a second, because I think this is a really important topic, especially as it relates to challenging our ability to be empathetic. So imagine a nurse who's been working long shifts, in like a high stress environment, constantly caring for patients with severe illnesses. Over time, the emotional toll of that job starts to affect her ability to connect with her patients on a deeper level. She finds herself going through the motions, focusing on tasks rather than the people behind them. This isn't because she doesn't care, but because she's emotionally drained. Emotional burnout is a significant roadblock to empathy because it depletes the very energy needed to connect with others. The constant stress and pressure can lead to feelings of detachment, cynicism, resentment, making it even harder to challenge that or harness that power of compassion and understanding that empathy requires. To combat this, the nurse could practice self-care, take regular breaks, seek counseling, or even find time for activities that bring her joy. By prioritizing her own well-being, she can slowly rebuild her emotional reserves and re-engage with her patients on a more empathetic level. This is why also I talk so much about cognitive empathy versus emotional empathy, and then asking yourself, what can I do in this situation? The most important thing about empathy, especially in high stress positions, high stress situations, is to ask yourself, what is my goal? What can I do in this moment? It's not a good choice to say, I don't have anything left. I don't have anything to give emotionally right now, but I'm still going to try to practice emotional empathy. It's not going to work out for you. It's not going to work out for the other person. So it's incredibly important that you're saying, hey, how full is my cup? How much can I give? And then if you can't give enough or you can't give what is needed for that other person, then either tag somebody else in or do something to empty your cup. Take care of yourself. And the other thing with emotional burnout is it creeps up on us gradually. It's not usually something that just hits all of a sudden. We might not even realize how depleted we are until it begins to affect our relationships, our interactions. So it's incredibly important that we recognize the signs of emotional burnout, whether it's irritability, fatigue, a lack of enthusiasm. Maybe you're shorter with people than you usually are. So we got to take proactive steps when we start to see some of these symptoms of burnout. Set boundaries at work. Seek support from your colleagues or your leaders. Engage in activities that replenish your emotional energy. Find out what type of resources are out there if your company has an EAP plan. Do something that gives you success and makes you feel good that you're accomplishing something. Replenish your cup. If not, you are not going to be able to provide empathy effectively. You're just not. And it's going to have that adverse effect. Let's take a moment to revisit bias in the workplace and the halo effect. So imagine you have a coworker who's really good at presenting ideas in meetings. Because of this one strength, you might assume that they're equally skilled in other areas, whether it be management or interpersonal communication, without actually evaluating, hey, do they have strengths in this area, or I'm just hoping that they do because of this other thing that I admire. This mental heuristic can lead to misunderstandings, prevent you from seeing the full picture. It might have you think either higher or less of a colleague's abilities or their ability to overcome challenges. See, the halo effect is a really common roadblock that I don't think a lot of people think of when it comes to empathy, because it shortcuts the process of understanding. It allows us to move quickly when empathy is about patience and understanding. Instead of taking the time to get to know someone fully, we look at this single characteristic, form an opinion, and then that can lead to superficial connections and missed opportunities. This is incredibly prevalent in social media or in our interactions where we are trying to process a lot of information in a very short period of time. Yes, mental heuristics can make our life more efficient because we can move through things without being paralyzed by every decision. But when it comes to people, it could definitely be problematic. So the challenge with the halo effect is a lot of it is in our unconscious. We don't even realize we're doing it. So it's easy to overlook how it might impact our interactions. To overcome the halo effect, we need to be intentional about gathering more information. We need to question our initial impressions. It's kind of like saying thinking about thinking. This means engaging in conversations that explore different facets of a person's personality, asking questions that go beyond surface level interactions, being open to revising our judgments as we learn more, being willing to change your mind. When new information is presented, it is okay to say, I now have a new path forward. I now have a new opinion based on this particular topic. I'm now willing to work towards a different solution, maybe a solution I wouldn't otherwise consider, but now because of this new information, I'm open to it. It's okay to change your mind, people. I promise you. I promise you. The other barrier to empathy, and this is one I talk about quite a bit, this is when we are emotionally invested in a particular outcome, like really emotionally connected to how this thing turns out. A good example of that is like when you're in a political debate, especially with the presidential election going on right now, or it could be a personal decision that's involving someone really close to you, someone you really care about. Let's say you're in a heated discussion about politics and you're convinced that your preferred candidate is the best choice for president. Your friend, however, supports a different candidate. Because you're so emotionally invested in your own view, it can become difficult to listen to your friend's perspective without immediately trying to convince them that they're wrong. It's when we're getting this back and forth debate, this power struggle. This scenario is common, especially in today's polarized climate. Emotional investment in personal beliefs is a major roadblock to empathy because it creates a barrier between us and others. When we're so focused on our perspective, we may struggle to even consider that someone else's view could be valid. This could lead to conflict, misunderstandings, and breakdowns in communication. It's like that expression, are you listening to learn or are you listening to speak? Are you trying to convince or persuade, or are you just trying to understand? The answer to all of those questions can largely be dependent on how emotionally connected you are to being right or into proving that this opinion, this thing that you're feeling is true. The challenge is finding balance between holding on to our convictions, and remaining open to others' perspectives. It requires us to set aside our need to be right and focus instead on our understanding of where the person is coming from. But a really important point here, and I think this is why empathy kind of goes off the rails sometimes for people, is that doing this doesn't mean you're abandoning your beliefs. You're just approaching the conversation with curiosity and a genuine desire to connect, even if you disagree. Techniques like active listening, open-ended questions, acknowledging a person's feelings can help us do this. It can help us navigate difficult conversations with empathy. But you still have your belief system. Yes, have it. We want you to have it. You still have your values. Yes, we want you to have it. We want people to have opinions that are very real to them. But you also need to be curious about the other things in the world that are happening and the other people around you. If the idea is to bring people together and affect change, to practice understanding. So look, it's difficult. Our ability to empathize fluctuates based off of the topic and our investment in it. And it's going to be challenging, but I assure you, you can do it if we can suspend our ego just a little bit. An example of this that I always love and I talk about quite a bit was Ernesto Sorelli, who shared a story on a TED Talk. And if you have not watched his TED Talk, please go check that out. Essentially, I think it's called Shut Up and Listen. I don't have it in front of me right now, but his name is Ernesto, Ernesto, Sorelli, Sirolli. He shared a story from his work in Africa. Him and his team, they were really eager to help a local village, and they wanted to introduce agriculture techniques into the region, teach them how to grow certain crops. So they assumed, hey, we're doing this great service for this village. They're going to be excited that we're here. They're going to help us. They're going to be grateful and thankful. But the villagers weren't. And what happened is, you know what? I'm not going to tell you what happened because I do not want to take Mr. Ernesto's shine. I challenge you to go watch his TED Talk. I was going to do it in this podcast. I really wanted to share but I don't want to do the spoiler alert thing. So go watch his TED Talk. Ernesto Cerelli, Ernesto. And again, his story is so powerful because he is an educated, experienced gentleman who just wants to help people, yet he fell victim to these roadblocks that we're talking about, especially when, all right, I'm not going to tell you. So the challenge with assumptions is that they often come from a place of good intentions. We want to help, we believe we're doing the right thing, but we fail to take the time to understand the situation fully. So overcoming this roadblock requires humility. If you want to humble others, you got to practice humility first. You got to suspend your ego. The willingness to admit that we don't have all the answers, that we need to listen more than we speak. It can be a lot for people, but it's about prioritizing the voices and the experiences of those we aim to support, rather than imposing our solutions on them, telling them what they need to do or how they need to think. Let's go back to the workplace a second. So imagine a coworker comes to you and says, I'm having a really tough time here and I'm thinking of leaving the job. A roadblock to empathy would be responding with something like, well, everyone has tough days. You just got to push through it. This response dismisses their feelings. It doesn't address the concerns. A more empathetic response would be, I'm sorry to hear that. What's been going on that's making you feel this way? This approach, it opens up a conversation. It says, hey, I'm interested in hearing more, instead of jumping to my assumption of what I think is happening or just giving you some sympathy and keeping it moving. It really shows that you care about the well-being and you're willing to listen. Everyday situations like this one are opportunities to practice empathy, but they can also allow us to trip into some roadblocks as well, like dismissiveness, offering solutions, trying to fix something or fix someone before fully understanding the problem. I'm not going to lie to you and say, hey, the expectation is that you should practice empathy every day in all of your interactions with everyone you interact with. It is not possible, because true empathy requires us to slow down and be present in the moment. But in our fast-paced world, it's easy to rush through interactions, offering quick fixes instead of taking time to listen and connect. So it all goes back to asking yourself, in this moment, in this interaction, in this situation, would empathy be valuable? Could empathy have a positive impact on this situation? If it could, then you have to ask yourself, and am I the one that can give it? Do I have it in me to be intentional about understanding in this moment? And then try to make decisions that align with those questions that you're asking yourself. Really, to do this, we got to have a little bit of mindfulness too, being aware of our own tendencies to jump to conclusions or brush off concerns, and instead make a conscious effort to engage with empathy and understanding. It's about being willing to sit with someone in their discomfort, offering support, without trying to fix them. I keep saying it. You can't fix other people, by the way. I'm sorry if you think you can. You cannot. They got to fix themselves. And then recognizing that someone just sometimes needs you to just be there. Just be there to listen. So let's talk, before we wrap up this episode, on some steps to have empathy or foster empathy in your life. And the first one, we kind of touched on it a little bit, is self-care, emotional regulation. So combating emotional burnout. And the main way to do this, the best way to do this, is take care of yourself first. This doesn't just mean physical self-care, even though that's incredibly important. The ability to get out there, exercise, be active, but also emotional and well-being. Engage in activities that help you recharge. Meditation, spending time with loved ones. Again, going on a walk. By taking care of yourself, you'll be better equipped to care for others, reinforcing the trust and the connection that empathy thrives on. Another thing is being aware of these biases. So when we challenge our personal biases, that requires some real self-awareness and a commitment to understanding how our previous experiences have influenced our decisions. Be mindful of the halo effect and other mental heuristics that can distort your perception of others. Instead of relying on first impressions, take the time to gather a full picture of a person's strengths, weaknesses, and needs. Humans are very complex. You are very complex. Invest a little bit more on the front end to overcome some of those biases. And then the last thing is the vulnerability of practicing empathy, the emotional investment that comes with it. It's not when you're scared to be vulnerable. That doesn't mean you're abnormal or you're weak. It's actually a strength that you have that self-awareness to say that. Then what do you do next is most important. Are you willing to open up about your own experiences and emotions? Can you be receptive to others when they do the same? This is especially important when you're emotionally invested in the outcome of the situation you're talking about or the topic you're talking about. By acknowledging your emotions, taking a step back, you can listen more openly and more empathetically. This emotional exchange deepens trust, it deepens connection, allowing empathy to flourish even in situations where you have like a strong personal stake in it. And finally, make empathy a priority in your interactions. If I could challenge you to do that as far as like a call to action. Again, you're not going to do it all the time, but can we do one empathetic interaction a day? It could be a small act of kindness. It could be taking the time to listen where you would normally talk about yourself. It could be simply being mindful of how your interactions or how your actions affect others. These choices can contribute to a more empathetic world. It's not about just sitting down with someone and listening to them for an hour. I'm not asking you to be a therapist out there all the time. Just be more cognizant of how the effect you have on others. By aligning or trying to align your actions with empathy, you reinforce your own credibility. And then you're better able to make logical choices that could help others. And then that also gives you the strength and the courage and allows you to empty your cup so that then you have some emotion that you can pour into others when you're ready to do so, and especially into the lives of those around you, the people you care about the most. So look, empathy is a powerful tool. It's not easy to practice. I'm not going to lie to you and say it is, especially when we're invested in the outcome of the situation. But by recognizing and addressing some of the roadblocks that we talked about, whether they're the emotional ones, the creating trust, mental heuristics, the halo effect, if we can be more aware of these and practice some ways to overcome them, we can be more effective in our efforts to connect with others. And when we do that, we can build a more compassionate world and affect real change that can lift all of us up. So thank you for joining me. This was an interesting episode for me. I hope it was interesting for you as well. This is, again, the Empathy Here, Not There podcast. If you enjoyed this discussion, make sure to subscribe and follow the podcast on your favorite platform so you never miss an episode. If you would like to be a guest on an upcoming episode and you feel you can speak to empathy in a particular context or in a certain profession, reach out to me. I would love to hear from you, and let's make it happen. Just send me an email at curtis@speakformc.com. Let's keep the conversation going. Continue to spread the power of empathy in our lives and communities, and let's positively influence change. Nothing will change unless we are willing to do the things that encourage it. So let's do it together. I appreciate everyone out there. Thank you for taking some time with me, and I will see you hopefully for episode 6. Have a good one, everybody.